Hey, good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Mark.
Dan, why don't you go ahead and let's introduce ourselves to the audience this morning, okay? Tell us a little bit about you, and then we're going to dive into this great conversation, healing journeys with cancer.
Mark, thanks for having me, and thanks for the work that you and Michelle are doing to provide platforms and voices to folks like us. In terms of myself, I'm a cancer patient. I have been on a 21-year journey with cancer, and it's been a long journey, my brother. And at some point during that journey, intersected with psychedelic medicines. And as an outgrowth of that experience, my personal experience with cancer, my personal experience with psychedelic medicines, I founded Healing Cancer Journeys, which is a nonprofit with the mission of providing education and community for people exploring psychedelic medicines as part of their cancer journey.
So, could you tell me, Dan, could we ask real quick, what type of cancer did you have, or are you in remission now, or can you just fill the audience in a little bit?
Yeah, interestingly, I've been diagnosed with two types of cancer. So the first type of cancer was testicular cancer that spread up into my stomach, into my lungs, into my neck. So it was a fairly advanced cancer. That was my initial diagnosis. And then a couple of years ago, I was also diagnosed with thyroid cancer, and they discovered the thyroid cancer as part of treating my testicular cancer. And so the cancer journey has been actually two cancers, both thyroid and testicular.
Do we all have cancer in us at some point and always going to manifest? Is that how that is?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Is that we all have cancer cells, and most of us who are healthy have a strong immune system, and our immune system finds the cells and kills them. And that's partly why it's important for us to keep our body strong and keep our immune systems strong and vigilant. But you're exactly right, is that we all have cancer in some way or another.
Someday it might show and someday it may not. So what
That's
inspired
right.
you to start your healing cancer journeys, and how did your personal path like into all these psychedelics kind of incorporate all this?
Yeah, I was suffering, just good old fashioned human suffering. In that 21-year journey, I've had two cancers, as I mentioned. I've had 11 or 12 surgeries. Honestly, I've just kind of lost count. Every single one of those surgeries, they carve me open and take out an organ or take it out some part of my body that has cancer. I've had 7 or 8 months of chemo. Chemo is not fun. You can see I have no hair on the top of my head. I've had any number of just medical interventions, PET scans and CAT scans, and that whole journey, it's tough. That there is a lot of anxiety and depression and physical pain, and I was looking to reduce that anxiety and depression, and had discovered psychedelic medicines and learned that a single dose could be effective in alleviating some of that suffering that I had experienced over my 20-year journey. And so that experience of suffering kind of sent me on a journey that ultimately ended up with me discovering psychedelic medicines.
But I just want to definitely ask because I've heard how psychedelics can incorporate with all this, and it's mostly with the depression and the anxiety and the after effects. But is this mostly psilocybin we're working with here?
Yeah, it's predominantly psilocybin. I've explored other psychedelic medicines as well, but primarily psilocybin, and in a couple of different settings, right? In settings where I have had a therapeutic dose, a fairly high dose, in a guided journey where I had a guide. I've also used psilocybin in smaller doses, in kind of microdoses, and combine that with breath work. And that combination of psilocybin and breath work is really able to take me to places that are not unlike that higher therapeutic dose, that more guided journey.
So you're doing a combination of both. You're going on a bigger, larger journey, and that's mostly to shake the snow globe up and come back to how you want to resettle yourself. And then you're microdosing on a daily basis with the so on 2 days, two on off. Correct?
Yeah, and I'll say the bigger journey, the therapeutic dose with a guide, that was really interesting, in that I was able to confront cancer. I was able to experience cancer as an embodied thing and have a conversation with cancer. My microdosing is not something that I do on a regular basis. It's something that I do probably once or twice a month. Again, usually in combination with some really intense breath work. But it is when I feel like I need something, when there is um, a specific problem that I want to work in, and entering that space with a low dose combined with breath work is really powerful for me to go at that problem that I'm seeking to address.
Well, let's go back to the bigger journeys because that's kind of
Yeah.
interesting to me because we go to these. I mean, we all know. So if we know who have been on these journeys, you go into a different space, into a different area, and do a different kind of talk to yourself. And I bet you it's
Yeah.
really interesting when it comes to the cancer, and you're actually there in a space that you can actually almost talk to that. And what do you say? And are you are you resentful during those moments, or do you get angry? Because I could see that happening through an experience.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I had a really interesting conversation with cancer during one of my journeys. I was with my guide, and I was able to see cancer for the first time, see it as a thing, because prior to that, I just experienced it as this big cosmic idea or punishment that I had a lot of guilt about. And just being able to see it and visualize it and experience it in the same way that I can hear your voice and see you was really powerful to kind of shrink cancer down to something that I could manage. And I remember saying to my guide, okay, cancer's here. And there was a long pause, and we just kind of waited and we sat with cancer. And my guide said, well, what does cancer want to say? And there was another long pause. And eventually I said, you know what? It's not saying a damn thing. Cancer has not got a damn thing to say to me. And I didn't understand what that meant in the moment, but all of the work afterwards, that integration to understand why cancer was present in my journey and why it didn't say a damn thing, that integration process helped me understand that cancer is not this cosmic punishment for something that I did wrong. I had a tremendous amount of guilt, but the fact that it made an appearance and it didn't say a damn thing meant to me that it was just a random bit of bad luck. It's just a random gene that flipped, and then all of a sudden I have cancer. And reducing cancer from this big, scary monster to this thing that doesn't really have a meaning and doesn't really have a damn thing to say to me was really, really powerful in me being able to accept cancer as my reality.
And that's like you explained the journey really almost how it happens too. The quietness, the pauses, how it happens, and your thoughts. And that's exactly and then you talk to that cancer, now you minimized it. And just by talking to you the short time that we're talking, I mean your outlook is very very almost childlike. You're almost you've lived through it, and I love that. And it's like, okay, this is it, and I've got this, and I can deal with this. And I can tell you've done psychedelics because most people wouldn't they couldn't accept that like that. They would be like, And you said in the beginning, it was like, is this my punishment? But, you know, it's your body. It's what, I mean, who's punishing who? And I think you explained a journey really well with that. And so I have to say that's really how a journey is. And it's pretty cool how that works. And do you use anything else? Because plants are very beneficial to healing a lot of our modalities. So, and mushrooms are very beneficial. So, besides the psychedelic mushrooms, which we know is really good for the mind, do you use anything else? Any other kind of supplements, mushroom wise?
Not mushroom wise. Psychedelics wise, I have used MDMA. Have found that to be really, really powerful in terms of integrating some of the traumatic experiences that I've had, sitting with loved ones and integrating that trauma has just been tremendously powerful. But in terms of other mushrooms, no, I'll tell you, Mark, I've been listening to your podcast, have learned a lot from you and your guests. And so you're opening my mind, but have not walked down that path of experimenting with other supplements.
I mean, it would just be saying it makes just so much sense because, you know, I never say it all the time. Most of our pharmaceuticals that we have nowadays, there's so many plants are involved. And, you know, I think we're missing the big picture by encapsulating all these things and not really going for the true source, you know. I mean, because everybody wants some quick timing thing. But look at you. You've been living with cancer for 20 years and you seem happier now living with cancer than maybe you were before. And I don't know because I just don't know.
You used the word childlike earlier, and I think that's exactly right. Is
Oh, I
that
am.
there? Yeah, that
Yeah,
is a positive thing, right? There's something
for sure.
about
Yeah.
growing up and growing old that puts us into these rigid states of mind, and
Uh-huh.
psychedelics break us open, right? I will say with my cancer journey, cancer picked me up and just broke me over its knee, right? Just turned my life upside down in ways that were initially really, really, really scary, but I've since come to accept. And that journey with cancer of breaking you open and kind of forcing you to accept something that you can't control, that is also very much the psychedelic journey, right?
Absolutely. Hmm.
Which is something happening to you, a new reality settling in, a new reality that you maybe never experienced before. And so those parallels between the cancer journey and the psychedelic journey are just so powerful to push us back into that childlike state that allows us to accept reality for what it is and not necessarily what we would want it to be.
Yeah, for sure. Because cancer, like, it has to bring, you know, if I heard I had cancer today, it would bring up every fear in the world. You know, am I going to die? Am I this, that, that? And I'll let you explain it, but the psychedelics, and when you're doing these psychedelics, it kind of like it puts you at ease at your mind because you're here and now, and you have to deal with these things. And it's just pretty amazing that you've incorporated these two, and on the same hand, they're both very feared. Cancer is very feared. Psychedelics are very feared. Okay. But why? You know, why? We've, we've, we're in a society that we've made ourselves fear these things, or society has made us fear them. Because I don't know if cancer is really that fearful. I can give you a story. My son is only 25 years old and he got tongue cancer at the age of 21. So I contributed that to a few things. I mean, his unhealthiness, and it was just a lot of stress from previous marriage of ours that he had to deal with. And I think he still has to deal with it. I think a lot of it, I'm not a doctor by any means, but I would say a lot of cancers come from stress triggers and emotionals. And I don't think it's just something that just happens. It just doesn't. So,
It's just so hard to know what the cause is. And you spoke earlier to fear, and that's exactly right. And we're dealing with the triple stigma, right? The triple stigma of fear of cancer, fear of death, and often the fear of psychedelics, right? Is there's a lot of stigma and baggage associated with psychedelics. And that's very much why we want to have conversations like this. You mentioned earlier that if you had received a cancer diagnosis, that would trigger that fear and you would be afraid of dying. And Mark, I've got good news and bad news for you. Bad news is, brother, you are going to die. You are going to die. Good news, the good news is that dying is the most natural thing in the world. Dying is like the sun rising, the rain falling. It is the most natural thing in the world. And psychedelic medicines can help us accept and understand that reality that, yes, death is fearful. We don't know what that's like, but psychedelics can help us in that acceptance of death because it is the most natural thing in the world.
I think most of us that have had these bigger psychedelic experiences, we all fear death. But I think once we have a few of these, that diminishes significantly, at least for me. I mean, it doesn't even cross my mind anymore. When it used to cross my mind on a daily basis, getting in the car, doing this, am I going to die? But now I'm just, it doesn't. It's gone. It's like, okay. I think I have died in some of my experiences, but that's what psychedelics do. They kill to reborn. They kill you and kill per certain aspects to rebuild something. And, you know, fear fear is the only way to prosperity. Because if you don't, I mean, we sit stuck forever. If you don't face your fears, most of the time it's so silly. There's nothing even behind there that we're so scared of. But it's just facing those fears. And I think that's why we're all here on this earth, to face these fears and to keep living and to keep building it, because everything behind fear is truth. So, like, let's dive into a little bit about what your healing cancer journeys. What do y'all do here at these healing cancer centers? Can you explain to the audience a little bit?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, our mission is to provide education and community for people exploring psychedelic medicines in their cancer journeys. And those stated missions of providing education, of providing community, that's what we're driving towards. But I do think it's even more fundamental than that. It's really addressing stigmas. It's addressing that triple stigma that we see in cancer and death and psychedelics. And starting with just raising awareness and meeting people where they are, which is in digital channels in our digital lives. And so we're very much focused on providing digital education on Instagram, on TikTok, and just having conversations like this in those digital channels to bring down stigma. That's the primary focus. We're also um, focusing on elevating voices. We've started a program called Healing Cancer Voices, which is essentially StoryCorps for people using psychedelic medicines in their cancer journey. So don't know if you're familiar with StoryCorps, but it's an opportunity for folks to walk into a recording booth and tell their life story. And it's recorded and it's stored in the National Archives forever. And we're providing StoryCorps for people to capture their experiences with cancer and with psychedelic medicines so that we can collect those stories, so that we can highlight those stories, so that eventually we can share those stories. And again, that's about generating community. It's about reducing stigma. The other thing that we're working on is a podcast, and we've done some uh, pilot podcast episodes. We're planning to launch our first season later this fall, and um, would love to turn the table someday and have you or Michelle on as a
Love
guest.
it. Love it.
Right now, it's very much providing education and building community.
There's a few challenges in this space, though. Don't you agree?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges, and The first challenge is the stigma, which we've talked about. There's also just a ton of legal gray areas, and that is something that we're all tiptoeing around. That is something that I hope evolves over time. But one of the big challenges, and candidly, one of the biggest limitations, is just the legal realities and those legal gray areas.
And it's sad we're tiptoeing around something that has been around for thousands and thousands of years. We disintegrated it in the last 50 years. Um, and the biggest thing when we just talk about psilocybin, nobody's ever died. So what are we fighting? What battle are we fighting here? It's the silliest thing. Um, and it's really ludicrous that we've done this to a society and pushed it down because the advancement where we would have been, I mean, it is what it is now, but I think more and more people are waking up to this, and me and you can talk about this, and the obstacles to overcome are the evil entity obstacles that don't want us to expand and grow and heal. It's really those are the obstacles. I mean, that's the only obstacles I have found. And what you do with these stories is the most important thing because
That's right.
somebody telling their story is the most important thing people can get because in any way, shape, or form, that story is going to benefit somebody. So telling
That's right.
stories like psychedelic stories, like what you do with cancer stories, even 15, 10 minute clips, people love it. They just love it because that's me, that's you, that's us, even if it's not you, something, if you don't like that one, there's another person's story that's going to be you for
That's
sure.
right. And we have to recognize how difficult it is to tell these stories. I'll say it is really difficult for me to be in this environment right now where I'm sharing very sensitive personal health information. I'm sharing very sensitive information about my journeys with psychedelic medicines. I am exceptionally vulnerable right now, and that is really hard to do. And by having these conversations, having these difficult conversations, hopefully it makes it a little bit easier for other folks to have them in the future. And you're right, it's sad that our society has created an environment where it's hard to have conversations. You talked about medicines, and if we think about chemotherapies or other treatments for cancer, if there's a treatment for cancer that increases survival by a couple of months or a couple of weeks, that is embraced by oncologists, by patients, celebrated, right? We get to live for another couple of months because of this new treatment. And we're so focused on quantity of life that we forget about quality of life. And we totally lost sight of the fact that psychedelic medicines can improve our quality of life. And for some reason, these medicines that increase quantity of life, we've embraced. The FDA approves them. Pharmaceutical companies charge thousands of dollars for them. Oncologists prescribe them, widely accepted. But something that improves quality of life, like psychedelic medicines, is stigmatized, and it's really, really, really sad.
Because
And
they need to
that's
keep
the
you
environment.
alive a little more to collect a little more money from you. Let's keep you
Yeah.
alive.
Uh,
We're collecting another week's salary, another week. We don't want you being
don't
any
get me
better. We'll just keep you alive to collect more.
don't get me
It's
wrong.
just a
I
crazy.
want to try and stay alive as long as possible. So I don't knock quantity of life, but we don't want to lose sight of quality of life too. That's like I would rather have 3 good months, 3 more good months than 6 more shitty months. But that's not how the medical establishment thinks. And it's that thinking that shades how we approach psychedelic medicines. And it's sad. It's sad.
Is there any? We'll get off psychedelics a little bit and talk about maybe cannabis, which is a plant. But is there any like I hear RSO really has a lot of great benefits when it comes to cancer patients. Is that something you've ever used or seen use? And I mean, I don't know. I've just heard.
Yeah, I'll tell you with cannabis, very early on, I've been on a 20-year journey. So this was 20 years ago, and our perspectives on cannabis have very much changed. 20 years ago, there there were not edibles available, right? And the only way to consume cannabis was to smoke it, obviously. And my oncologist said very clearly, "You have cancer in your lungs." The cancer had spread from my testicle into my lungs, and she said, "Do not smoke cannabis." And I understood why. And that has always sat with me, that I want to be cautious. And I think that that's a, a really important thing for us to be cognizant of as cancer patients, that some of these medicines that for someone who is healthy or doesn't have cancer in their lungs or isn't on a lot of other medications or hasn't been through a lot of surgery are completely appropriate, but we need to be a little bit more cautious. Our bodies are a little bit more brittle. And so something like cannabis, I've always approached very, very cautiously.
Interesting. Interesting. So edibles, no?
I've used edibles from time to time, but it was just I was very, very, very impressionable when I was told, "Do not smoke cannabis," and it was for very specific reasons. You know, you don't want smoke in your lungs when you also have cancer in your lung. But it really made an impression on me, and so cannabis is just not something that I've necessarily explored. Now, that being said, there's tremendous benefits for controlling nausea for folks who don't have cancer in their lungs or are not smoking it, but the impact on nausea, um, and just helping to reduce sleep, anxiety, things like that. But it just personally hasn't been something that has been beneficial for me.
So running people through this process, are you seeing a lot of setbacks or a lot of people having positive outcomes?
Yeah, I certainly see those outcomes, and it's really what I've experienced firsthand, right? Which is um, coming to acceptance of my cancer, and also just creating meaning from my cancer journey, right? And the power of medicines to be able to give us a different lens, to take something like cancer that was a diagnosis that just flipped my life upside down, and using those medicines to make meaning, to understand what happened to me. And so absolutely seen those benefits in accepting those realities of making meaning out of circumstances that are otherwise fairly traumatic.
Right. Is that the positive aspects you're getting from most people? They're understanding their cancer more and more when they're and how much like are you actually sitting with somebody when you go on these experiences or are you doing them on your own?
Right now I'm doing them on my own, and this is kind of getting back to some of the limitations in doing some of this work and those legal questions, is that we do not intend to provide direct access to psychedelic medicines. There are a number of other retreats and services and guides that can provide that access. What we want to provide is education, community, and then build bridges to those organizations that can provide access. But we want to stay within that education and community building domain. And that's because of some of the legal risks and some of the legal uncertainties in providing access,
Like
providing
how are you sitting? Are you
medicines.
sitting with yourself or you sitting with a guide or how are you working how are you working this protocol?
Yeah. And it's sitting with myself I have sat with a guy before. I have sat using microdoses. The nonprofit itself is really focused in on providing education and providing community and not necessarily providing access. And that's because there are any number of other organizations that can provide access, that can provide setting, that can provide the guide services, that can provide the post integration, and we want to build bridges, and we are building bridges to those types of organizations, but we want to stay firmly within that um, mission of education and community. And that's because of some of the legal risks, some of the legal uncertainties of providing access to this medicine. And
Well, are you seeing more and more people getting access? Are you seeing more and more people getting access with with the cancer to this medicine?
I'll tell you, it is tough. Let's think about how access occurs right now, which is, going on a retreat or it's underground. And if you go on a retreat, that is really expensive. And for folks who have, the financial means to do that, that is great. But let's recognize that those retreats are expensive and cancer is expensive. And when we think about if you're going on one of these retreats to address anxiety or depression, the cost of that retreat relative to an SSRI or a benzo, which you can go to a pharmacy and get really, really, really cheap. The economic realities is that it's just a lot cheaper to go down the traditional pharmaceutical route, relative to a retreat. Or you can go underground. And there are risks in going underground too, right? Is again going back to safety and recognizing that there can be interactions with other drugs, other medicines that we're taking for cancer treatments. There can be side effects, and because someone like me, I've had many, many, many surgeries. I need to be really, really cautious. And unfortunately, we have the potential of these healing medications, and we have to choose between a retreat, which is really, really, really expensive and much more expensive than traditional pharmaceuticals, or underground. And there are safety considerations, there are safety risks that we're taking in that environment. And,
Or you can
we
always
see a
grow
little bit
your
more.
own at that point if you're a
Yeah.
cancer patient. Because, working with these medicines for as long as we have, I don't think, there's not too many medicines that are counteractive to psilocybin. I mean, lithium is a strong one, but besides that, there's not too many in the pharmaceutical world that psilocybin is a bad friend to. There really isn't.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And it's a great point in terms of being able to grow your own, and that, as you know, it takes a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of equipment, but
Correct.
it's certainly doable, and it's a
Well, I
great
think we're
consideration.
advancing there too. I think there's a lot of companies now that are having grow bags, but I can see that is really, look at all these options we have, and then we come against the big man that's making these options so really difficult for us to access. So that leads me into my next question. Where do you see all this going? Where would you hope that all this goes? Because it's going somewhere, because psilocybin especially is like the avocado toast of the 2025s. I mean, everybody wants a piece of it and everybody wants to try it. And, I don't like that i- in a lot of ways, but I kind of embrace it in some ways.
I want to go down a path where we can all journey together. I don't know where this is going. I have some ideas, but I want to go down a path where we can all journey together. We can journey in community. As a cancer community, we can learn from the knowledge that you are bringing and the knowledge of others in the psychedelics community so that we can journey together. I my journey with psychedelics was fairly lonely, right? I just didn't have any knowledge. I didn't have any community. And I don't want other folks who are interested in exploring psychedelic medicines in their cancer journey to be alone. And so let's journey together. Let's journey together as a cancer community, and let's journey together with experts like you. Now, where this is
Mhm.
going, I hope that it starts with changes to the laws that make this really challenging. I think the current administration is perhaps a little bit more favorable to psilocybin and psychedelic medicines. We've seen some nice movement with ibogaine. We've seen some nice movement at the state level, and you see that
In places
momentum.
you never would think, like
Right,
Texas. Are you kidding
Texas,
me? You know?
Texas,
I mean, really.
Texas.
But yeah, we are definitely seeing a positive trend. Like that's the medicine of all medicines. I mean, when we talk about a healing medicine, I mean, ibogaine, I mean, let's do a iboga. First flood dose of iboga, what I've said this so many times, is an 85% cure rate for opiate addiction. You do two and you're at 97. And what are we doing? We're killing 1,000 kids a day, serving them fentanyl every single day. See, so there's a game here they're playing. We all kind of just have to navigate between the game, and
That's right.
it's pretty sad that they're
Yeah.
using the people as their pawns.
And we are making progress, and the the veterans community in particular has really been driving this, has really been leading this, and that's
It's the
because
biggest because how can you? It's it, besides something like cancer, it would be it's the biggest because how are you going to deny a veteran to whatever he wants? It's pretty sad,
and
but
it's
we have
put a
denied him for so many years.
we have and it's put a human face on that suffering. You can have these abstract debates about whether psychedelics are good or bad or whether the benefits are worth the risks. When you put a human face on a veteran who has served our country and is experiencing post-traumatic stress because of that, and there are these medicines that can help them, putting that human face is tremendously powerful. And we have the same opportunity to do that in the cancer community, to put a face to these experiences, to say the cancer community is suffering anxiety, depression, trauma, and these medicines have the potential to provide a tremendous amount of healing for individual people. And so I hope the cancer community can follow the path that the veteran community has really started to create, to put a human face on this and to help other people understand and appreciate what healing really looks like.
Very, I was going to ask you a question about ayahuasca, and I wonder if ayahuasca blends in with the cancer. And it might be a little dangerous of a medicine to do, but is it actually? I mean, it might be a wonderful medicine for cancer patients. The more I
So
think about it.
this is a great example of being really thoughtful. So for some folks who have experienced cancer, absolutely, I could see ayahuasca being tremendously beneficial. For me, I have had a number of surgeries, like from my chin to my hips, and um, vomiting is a very painful experience. And I also take medicine on a daily basis. And if I vomit that medicine back up, then I could be in some trouble. And so I need to be really thoughtful with something like ayahuasca, which, as you know, there's a high vomiting, a purging process. And for me, that type of medicine might not be a good fit. And this is why we want to have these conversations about which medicines, at which dose, in which setting, for which people, and finding the right medicine at the right dose and the right setting for the right person. That is the work to be done, and having a very nuanced conversation about all of that.
And we're almost there. I mean, it's just about education and, talking. It's more about telling these stories. Like these stories are so important. Like you said, like that's how the veteran community does it. They keep just telling stories, and more and more people are, their stories are going to be told. This is a lot different than cannabis. Psychedelics, you really see results from. I mean, if you would have looked at me 7 years ago, there's no way I'd be doing this today. I mean, that's unimaginable where I was 7 years ago. So I'm living proof that psychedelics have worked. Do I do as many as I did in the beginning? No, because that was the path I did. I did a lot at the beginning because I was really fucked up in my head. But once I really learned how to use the medicine and understood it, boy, did things change. Because in the beginning, I think we find something that psychedelics does that nothing has ever done. And then we grab onto that and we really dive in. At least I did. And because
That's right.
nothing worked for me, but all of a sudden here's this medicine that all of a sudden, wow, it really made me think different. Wow, I'm doing this different. And I did it different. Was I
That's
scared?
right.
Every time I go into an ayahuasca journey, every time I go and take a big mushroom, of course, but there's something at the end. There
That's
always
right.
is.
That's
So,
right. And your story, Mark, is tremendously powerful. And I believe that my story is powerful. And we're just two people. And the work you're doing here to provide a platform to tell these stories, for me to tell my story, if there's just one person out there living with cancer who's experiencing some of the suffering that I've experienced over the 20 years, and they hear your story or my story, then it's worth it. And thank you for the work that you're doing here to provide a platform for those stories.
yeah, thank you so much. We're gonna end it here. Why don't you tell a little bit about last plug about what you're doing out there?
Absolutely. Healing Cancer Journeys website is healingcancerjourneys.org. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Healing Cancer Journeys. Click that follow button. It helps us get the word out. It helps us tell more of the stories that we've been telling here. Let's journey together, Mark. Let's journey together.
Yeah, beautiful things. I think this all needs to be talked about. We're bringing a voice, and people bring the voice, and once people hear the voice, things start things start manifesting. So thanks, Dan.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Ciao.